Desperate Vulpine, Rebel begs the mechanic to shield her from the stars. Imagine this. A stunning, fox-like alien rebel, crimson fur dripping with sweat, golden eyes blazing with terror, crashes into a grimy human repair bay, begging a grease-stained mechanic to save her from a galaxy that wants her dead. She's Vira Kael, a desperate fugitive clutching a secret that could topple empires. And he's Jace Harrow, the only man crazy enough to defy the stars for her. In a universe where alien overlords crush worlds under their claws, one human's about to prove we're not just survivors. We're the damn heroes they'll never see coming. This isn't just a chase. It's a war of wits, guts, and forbidden sparks flying in the void. Buckle up, because when a Vulpine beauty pleads for salvation, humanity answers, with a wrench and a smirk that'll shake the cosmos. The artificial night cycle of Orion Satellite Station draped the sprawling repair bay in a shroud of dim, flickering light. Jace Harrow hunched over a rusted engine core, his grease-stained hands wrestling with a stubborn bolt. The soft hum of the station's life support systems buzzed in the background, a constant reminder of the thin line between survival and the void outside. At 32, Jace had seen his share of chaos, years as a mercenary before settling into the quieter life of a spacecraft mechanic, but nothing prepared him for the monotony of this place. "I swear," he muttered, wrenching the bolt free with a grunt, "this engine's more stubborn than my old drill sergeant. At least he paid me to put up with him." A faint clatter echoed from the far end of the bay, cutting through his grumbling. Jace froze, his wrench hovering midair. The station's repair sector was a ghost town this late in the cycle. Most of the crew were either asleep or drowning their boredom in the cantina 3 levels up. He squinted into the shadows, the blue glow of a nearby terminal casting jagged reflections across the rows of disassembled ships. "If that's a rat, I'm charging it rent," he said to no one in particular, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit as he stood. The sound came again, sharper this time, a metallic scrape, followed by hurried footsteps. Jace's hand drifted to the multi-tool at his belt, a habit from his mercenary days. He wasn't expecting trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him. "All right, who's playing hide-and-seek in my bay?" he called out, his voice echoing off the steel walls. "Fair warning, I'm armed with sarcasm and a wrench, and I'm not afraid to use either." The shadows shifted, and a figure stumbled into the light. Jace's jaw dropped, his quip dying in his throat. She was no human, not by a long shot. Crimson fur shimmered under the terminal's glow, matted with sweat and clinging to a lithe, unmistakably feminine form. A bushy tail, long and thick, swayed behind her, curling nervously around her waist like a living thing. Her ears, pointed and tufted, twitched atop her head, and her eyes, golden, luminous, and wide with panic, locked onto him. She was a Vulpine, one of the fox-like natives of Zorith, a planet Jace had only heard about in passing. And she was gorgeous, in a way that made his brain short-circuit for a solid 3 seconds. "Jace Harrow," she rasped, her voice trembling but melodic like wind chimes caught in a storm. Her whiskers quivered with each ragged breath. "You're the mechanic, yes? I need your help. Now." Jace blinked, still processing the sight of her. Yeah, that's me. Last I checked, my job description's fixing ships, not playing knight in shining armor." He gestured vaguely at her. "Whatever you are. No offense, lady, you're a knockout, but I don't do unscheduled damsel-in-distress gigs." "There's no time," she snapped, her tail lashing behind her. She took a step closer, and Jace caught a whiff of something earthy and wild, sandalwood mixed with a hint of ozone. "I'm Vira Kael, a scientist from Zorith. I've uncovered something they'll kill me for. They're already here, on the station. Please hide me." "Whoa, slow down, Red," Jace said, raising his hands. "You're telling me you've got a hit squad after you? What did you do? Steal the galaxy's last coffee ration?" He meant it as a joke, but the desperation in her eyes killed any humor he'd hoped to muster. Before he could press her further, a sharp chime rang from the security panel on his workbench. Frowning, he tapped it, pulling up the station surveillance feed. His stomach sank. A squad of armored figures marched through the docking bay 2 levels down, their sleek, black exosuits gleaming under the harsh lights. At their head strode a towering Vulpine with jet-black fur and a scar slashing across his muzzle. General Korvax, if Jace's hazy memory of Zorth's military served him right. The guy looked like he ate nails for breakfast and spat them out for fun. Well, damn, Jace muttered, glancing at Vira. You weren't kidding about the "they're here" part, were you? They'll tear this station apart to find me, Vira whispered, her claws digging into her palms. I have data, proof that Zorth's council is corrupt. They're planning something monstrous, and I'm the only one who can stop it. Jace rubbed the stubble on his jaw, his mind racing. He wasn't a hero. Hell, he'd left that life behind when he traded his rifle for a wrench. But something about her, the way her golden eyes pleaded with him, stirred an old instinct he couldn't shake. Plus, if those goons trashed his bay, he'd be stuck cleaning up the mess for weeks. All right, fine, he sighed, pointing to a hatch beneath a pile of spare parts. Get in there. It's a smuggling compartment. Don't ask why I've got one. If they come knocking, I'll just say I'm too busy arguing with this engine to notice a fugitive fox lady. Vira didn't hesitate. She darted to the hatch, her movements fluid despite her evident exhaustion, and slipped inside. Jace shoved a crate over the top, just as the security panel flashed red again. The feed showed Kor's squad splitting up, half heading toward the residential sector, the other half climbing the service ladders toward the repair bay. Great, Jace grumbled, grabbing a rag to wipe his hands. Just what I needed, uninvited guests with guns. Should have stayed a merc. At least I got paid for this crap. The bay doors hissed open without warning, and Jace spun around, pasting a lazy grin on his face as 3 Zorth soldiers stormed in. Their rifles swept the room, their visors glinting ominously. Korvax loomed behind them, his presence filling the space like a thundercloud. Jace Harrow, he growled, his voice a low rumble that made the tools on Jace's bench rattle. Mechanic. Human. Where is she? Jace leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. She? You mean my imaginary girlfriend? Sorry, pal, I don't date outside my species yet. You selling tickets to a fox hunt or something? Kor's lip curled, revealing a flash of fangs. Vira Kael, a traitor to Zorth. We tracked her to this station. Hand her over, or we dismantle this place piece by piece, starting with you. Dismantle my bay? Jace said, feigning outrage. Buddy, I've spent months organizing this chaos. You want her, you're welcome to dig through the scrap pile. Might find a spare wrench while you're at it. Looks like you could use one to fix that attitude. The general's claws flexed, and for a moment, Jace thought he'd pushed too far. But Kor gestured to his soldiers instead. Search it. Every corner. The troops fanned out, their boots clanging against the metal floor as they overturned crates and probed the shadows with their scanners. Jace kept his grin plastered on, but his heart hammered in his chest. The smuggling hatch was well hidden, left over from shady job he'd done years back, but if they got too close, Vira was done for. And probably him too. He sidled over to the workbench, pretending to tinker with the engine while keeping an eye on the soldiers. One of them paused near the crate hiding the hatch, his scanner beeping faintly. Hey, careful with that, Jace called out, waving his wrench. That's my vintage junk collection. You break it, you buy it. The soldier ignored him, crouching to inspect the floor. Jace's grip tightened on the wrench. He wasn't a fighter anymore, but he could still crack a skull if it came to it. Before he could decide whether to swing or bluff, the station's PA system crackled to life. Attention all personnel, unauthorized personnel detected in repair sector. Security lockdown initiated. Kor snarled, slamming a fist into a nearby console. Sparks flew, and Jace winced. That's coming out of your paycheck, not mine, he muttered under his breath. The general barked an order in a guttural language Jace didn't understand, and the soldiers regrouped, heading for the doors. This isn't over, human, Kor said, his golden eyes narrowing. We'll be back. Take your time, Jace shot back. I've got ships to fix and a nap to catch. He held his breath as the squad marched out, the doors sliding shut behind them with a hiss. The second they were gone, He shoved the crate aside and yanked open the hatch. Vira emerged, her fur disheveled, but her eyes sharp with gratitude. "You're insane," she said, brushing a lock of red fur from her face. "But thank you. Insane's my middle name," Jace replied, offering her a hand. "Actually, it's Daniel, but don't tell anyone. Now, how about we get you off this station before Scarface and his pals turn my bay into a war zone?" Vira nodded, her tail flicking nervously. "There's a derelict ship in Bay 7, small, fast. I saw it on my way in. Can you get it running?" Jace grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Lady, I can make anything fly, even my ex's hopes and dreams. Let's move." He led her through the maze of the repair bay, ducking under half-assembled hulls and weaving past coolant pipes. The station shuddered as security bulkheads began to drop, the lockdown tightening its grip. "Faster," Vira urged, her voice tight with fear. "Relax, Red," Jace said, though his own pulse was racing. "I've got this. Worst case, we hitch a ride with the next garbage scow. Hope you like the smell of recycled protein packs." They reached Bay 7, a cluttered corner where a battered scout ship sat collecting dust. Jace popped the access panel, his hands flying over the controls as he hot-wired the ignition. "Come on, baby, don't let me down now," he muttered. The engines sputtered, then roared to life, filling the bay with a low, throaty hum. "That's my girl," he crowed, ushering Vira aboard. She hesitated at the hatch, her golden eyes searching his face. "If you help me, you'll be a target too." "Are you sure?" Jace shrugged, climbing into the pilot's seat. "Sure? Nah, but I've had worse days, like the time I fixed a pirate's ship and he paid me in expired rations. Besides, I'd rather piss off a general than spend another night arguing with this station's vending machines." A faint smile tugged at Vira's lips, softening her sharp features. "Jace," she said simply, and damn if his name didn't sound better in that voice than it ever had before. "Hold tight," he replied, punching the throttle. The ship lurched forward, slipping through the bay doors just as the station's alarms screamed to life. Through the viewport, Jace caught a glimpse of Corps' squad storming back into the repair sector, their rifles raised. "Yeah, good luck catching us now," he muttered, guiding the ship into the void. "Next stop, anywhere but here." The scout ship shuddered as it broke free of Orion Station's docking clamps, the viewport flooding with the endless black of space. Jace Harrow gripped the controls, his knuckles white against the worn leather grips, as the engines whined in protest. "Come on, you rusty bucket," he muttered, flicking a switch to coax more power from the thrusters. "I've sweet-talked worse junkers than you into flying." Beside him, Vira Kael braced herself in the co-pilot's seat, her crimson fur catching the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Her bushy tail coiled tightly around her waist, a nervous tick that made her look both vulnerable and wild. Through the rear viewport, Orion Station shrank into a gleaming speck against the void, its artificial rings spinning lazily. But the peace didn't last. A sharp beep erupted from the console, and Jace cursed under his breath as red warning lights flashed across the screen. "Oh, fantastic," he said, tapping the display with a greasy finger. "Looks like our pals back there aren't ready to wave goodbye just yet." Vira leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing as she scanned the radar. "Zorith interceptors," she said, her voice tight. "Two of them, closing fast. They must have launched from the station's auxiliary base." "Interceptors? What? Did I miss the memo about a galactic dogfight?" Jace shot her a sidelong glance, his grin more bravado than confidence. "Guess I should have charged you extra for the VIP escape package. Buckle up, Red. We're about to see if this heap can dance." He yanked the controls hard to the right, sending the ship into a spiraling dive. The inertial dampeners groaned, barely keeping up, and a loose tool kit slid across the floor with a clatter. Vira clutched the armrests, her claws digging into the cracked upholstery. "Do you even know how to fly this thing?" she hissed, her whiskers twitching with each jolt. "Know how? Sure. Do it well? That's a negotiation between me and gravity," Jace replied, his tone light despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "I've flown worse, Once outran a pirate frigate with a ship held together by duct tape and spite. We'll be fine. Probably. The radar blipped again, louder this time, and Jace's stomach twisted as two sleek, predatory shapes emerged on the viewport. Zorth interceptors, sharp-nosed and bristling with weapons, cut through the void like knives. A burst of orange light flared from one of them, and a pulse blast scorched past the scout ship's hull, missing by inches. The cockpit shook violently, and Jace let out a low whistle. Okay, not fine. Definitely not fine. They're shooting at us. Rude much. They won't stop, Vira said, her voice steady despite the chaos. General Core wants me alive, but they'll disable the ship to get me. We need to lose them. Lose them? In this flying scrap pile? Jace laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Lady, I'm good, but I'm not a miracle worker. Unless you got a cloaking device stashed in that fancy tail of yours, we're going to need a plan B, and fast. Vira's ears flicked forward, her gaze darting to the console. There, she said, pointing to a cluster of blips on the navigation chart. A debris field, remnants of an old mining operation. It's our best chance to shake them. Jace arched an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. Debris field, huh? All right, Red, you're promoted to navigator. Just don't blame me if we end up as part of the scenery. He banked the ship hard, aiming for the jagged patch of space ahead. The viewport filled with a chaotic sprawl of twisted metal and shattered rock, leftovers from some long-forgotten disaster. It was a gamble, but he played worse odds. The interceptors followed, their engines glowing hot as they closed the gap. Jace wove the scout ship through the field, dodging chunks of debris with a mix of skill and blind luck. A jagged hull fragment loomed ahead, and he pulled up sharply, the ship's underbelly scraping against it with a teeth-rattling screech. Sorry about that, he shouted over the noise. I'll buff out the scratches later, if we live. Vira didn't respond, her focus locked on the radar. They're splitting up, she said, her tail uncurling slightly as she pointed. One circling to flank us, the others holding position behind. Smart little bastards, Jace muttered, swerving to avoid a spinning asteroid. Guess they didn't buy my clueless mechanic act back there. Hang on, I've got an idea. He spotted a massive derelict freighter drifting ahead, its hull pocked with holes but still intact enough to hide in. If we can duck inside that thing, maybe they'll think we crashed and call it a day. It's risky, Vira warned, her eyes flicking to him. If they scan too closely. Risky's my specialty, Jace cut in, flashing her a grin. Besides, I'd rather take my chances with a ghost ship than play target practice with those trigger-happy furballs. He gunned the engines, steering toward a gaping tear in the freighter's side. The scout ship slipped through just as another pulse blast streaked past, slamming into a drifting rock and sending shards pinging off the hull. The interior of the derelict was a cavernous maze of rusted beams and dangling cables, lit only by the faint flicker of the scout ship's running lights. Jace cut the engines, letting the ship drift silently among the wreckage. All right, power down everything but life support, he said, flipping switches with practiced ease. We're playing dead. Hope you're good at holding your breath, Red. Vira nodded, her claws retracting as she exhaled shakily. The cockpit fell silent, the only sound the distant creak of the freighter's decaying frame. Through the viewport, they watched as the interceptors prowled outside, their searchlights sweeping the debris field. One passed dangerously close, its beam cutting through the darkness just meters from their hiding spot. Jace held his breath, his hand hovering over the throttle, ready to bolt if they were spotted. They're not leaving, Vira whispered, her voice barely audible. Her tail brushed against his leg in the cramped cockpit, a soft, accidental touch that sent a jolt through him despite the situation. He glanced at her, catching the glint of her golden eyes in the dark, and quickly looked away. Focus, idiot, he told himself. Now's not the time to notice how damn pretty she is. Give him a minute, he murmured back, keeping his tone casual. They'll get bored eventually. Or hungry. Do Zorth guys eat snacks on the job? I'd kill for a protein bar right now. He patted his jumpsuit pockets as if one might magically appear, earning a faint, exasperated huff from Vira. The interceptors lingered for what felt like an eternity, their lights crisscrossing the field before finally veering off. The radar blipped once, twice, then fell silent. Jace let out a long breath, slumping back in his seat. "Well, that was closer than I'd like," he said, running a hand through his sweat-damp hair. "Remind me to charge you hazard pay when this is over." Vira didn't smile, but her ears relaxed slightly, a small sign of relief. "They'll be back," she said, her voice heavy. "Core won't stop until he has me, or the data I'm carrying." "Data?" Jace turned to her, curiosity piqued. "What's so special about it that they're willing to turn my quiet night into a galactic chase scene?" "Spill it, Red. I'm not flying blind for nothing." She hesitated, her claws tapping nervously against the armrest. Then, with a deep breath, she met his gaze. "It's a genetic treatment," she said. "A cure for a degradation that's been plaguing my people for decades. Low fertility, shortened lifespans. I stole it from Zorth's research labs when I found out the Council wasn't going to share it. They want to control who gets it, keep the masses weak while the elite thrive." Jace whistled low. "So, you're what? A one-woman revolution? That's ballsy, even for a fox lady with a tail like that." He nodded toward her bushy appendage, then caught himself. "Not that I'm staring or anything, just noticing. Professionally." Her whiskers twitched, a flicker of amusement breaking through her tension. "You're not what I expected from a human mechanic," she said, her voice softening. "Most would have handed me over without a second thought." "Yeah, well, most humans don't have my sparkling personality," Jace replied, smirking, "or my knack for sticking my neck out when I should be running the other way. Guess you're lucky I'm a sucker for a good cause and a pretty face." Vira's ears flicked, and for a moment, he thought he saw a blush beneath her crimson fur. Before she could respond, the console chirped again, a new alert flashing across the screen. Jace groaned, leaning forward. "What now? Don't tell me they've got reinforcements." "No," Vira said, her eyes widening as she studied the display. "It's a transmission from Orion Station. They've locked down the sector and issued a station-wide alert for a dangerous fugitive." "Me." "Great," Jace said, throwing up his hands. "Now I'm officially an accomplice. You owe me a beer, Red. Maybe two, depending on how many bounty hunters show up." He tapped the controls, bringing the engines back online with a low rumble. "We can't stay here. That freighter trick bought us time, but they'll figure out soon enough. Any ideas?" Vira pointed to the NAV chart, her claw tracing a path. "There's a supply outpost, Kronos 9, 2 hours from here. Minimal staff, mostly automated. We could lie low there, figure out our next move." "Kronos 9 it is," Jace said, plotting the course. "Let's hope they've got better vending machines than Orion. I am starving." He punched the throttle, and the scout ship surged forward, slipping out of the derelict's shadow and into the open void. The debris field faded behind them, but the weight of their situation settled heavier with each passing second. As the stars streaked past the viewport, Jace glanced at Vira. Her profile was sharp and elegant, her crimson fur shimmering faintly in the cockpit's light. She was trouble, big, galaxy-shaking trouble, and he just signed up for the ride. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "you gonna tell me more about this data, or do I have to guess? 'Cause I'm betting it's not just a recipe for Voran cupcakes." Vira turned to him, her golden eyes steady despite the exhaustion lining her face. "It's everything," she said simply. "The future of my people. And if we don't get it to the right hands, Zorth will bury it, and me with it." Jace nodded, his grin fading into something more serious. "Then we'd better not screw this up," he said. "No pressure, right?" The ship hummed beneath them, carrying them deeper into the unknown, with the echoes of pursuit still ringing in the dark. The scout ship's engines hummed a low, uneven tune as it streaked through the void toward Kronos 9, the supply outpost Vira had pinned their hopes on. Jace Harrow slouched in the pilot's seat, one hand resting on the controls while the other rubbed the back of his neck, trying to ease the ache from their near-death dance with the Zorth interceptors. The cockpit was a cramped mess, loose wires dangling from the ceiling, a flickering dashboard that looked one sneeze away from giving up, and a faint smell of burnt coolant lingering in the air. Still, it was theirs for now, and that was enough. Beside him, Vira Kael sat rigid, her golden eyes fixed on the starfield beyond the viewport. Her crimson fur shimmered faintly in the dim light, though it was still musk from their escape, clinging to her lithe frame in a way that made Jace's gaze linger a beat too long. Her bushy tail curled tightly around her waist again, a telltale sign of the tension she was holding in. He couldn't blame her. Getting chased across the galaxy by a psycho general wasn't exactly a relaxing evening. "You good, Red?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "You're wound tighter than a cheap engine coil." Vira's ears flicked toward him, and she exhaled a shaky breath. "I'll be good when we're safe," she said, her voice soft but edged with steel. "Core won't stop. He'll scour every corner of this sector until he finds me. Or the data." "Yeah, about that data," Jace said, swiveling his chair to face her. "You dropped the future of my people bomb back there, but I'm still short on details. What's so special about this cure that's got your furry friends in a frenzy? And don't say it's complicated. I've heard that one from every client who's stiffed me on a repair bill." Her whiskers twitched, a flicker of amusement breaking through her exhaustion. "It's not complicated," she said, meeting his gaze. "It's a genetic therapy, decades in the making. My people, the Vulpine, have been dying out. Infertility, weakened immune systems, lifespans cut in half. I was part of the team that cracked it, a treatment to reverse the degradation. But the Zorith Council, they don't want it for everyone. They're hoarding it, planning to dole it out to loyalists while the rest waste away." Jace let out a low whistle, leaning back in his seat. "So, you're telling me you've got the galaxy's hottest ticket in your pocket, and the big shots want to keep it VIP only? That's cold, even for a bunch of fox-faced bureaucrats. What's their endgame? Ruling over a dying planet with a fancy cure as their scepter?" "Control," Vira said simply, her claws tapping the armrest. "They've ruled Zorith for centuries by keeping the colonies dependent. This therapy could free us, make us strong again. That's why I stole it. I was going to smuggle it to the outer worlds beyond their reach, stealing from the top dogs and running off to play hero." Jace grinned, shaking his head. "You've got guts, Red. I'd tip my hat if I had one. Guess that explains why Core's so pissed. He's not used to someone outfoxing him." He paused, then smirked. "See what I did there? Outfoxing? 'Cause you're. "Yes, Jace." Vira cut in, her tone dry but her lips twitching upward. "Very clever." "Hey, I'm a mechanic, not a comedian," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Cut me some slack. I'm running on adrenaline and bad decisions here." He turned back to the controls, but his mind was spinning. A cure that big wasn't just a noble cause. It was a powder keg, and he just strapped himself to it. The cockpit fell quiet, the hum of the engines filling the space between them. Jace glanced at Vira again, catching the way her fur caught the light, the subtle curve of her shoulders beneath it. She was a scientist, sure, but she moved like a predator, graceful, sharp, dangerous. It was distracting as hell, and he wasn't sure if that was a problem or a perk. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "how'd a brainiac like you end up on the run? I figured you'd be in a lab somewhere, not dodging lasers with a grease monkey like me." Vira shifted in her seat, her tail uncurling slightly as she relaxed. "Just a fraction. I was in a lab," she said, her voice softer now. "Years of it. But when I saw the Council's plans, I couldn't stay silent. I grew up on a colony world, saw what the degradation did to my family, my friends. I couldn't let it keep happening." Jace nodded, his usual quips fading. "Rough deal," he said. "Me, I bounced around after the Merc gigs dried up. Fixed ships, broke jaws, whatever paid. Orion was supposed to be my quiet retirement. Guess I jinxed that by saying quiet out loud." He flashed her a grin, but there was a flicker of something real behind it. "Point is, I get it. Screwing over the little guy's a universal pastime." Her golden eyes studied him, sharp and searching, and for a moment he felt exposed, like she could see right through his grease-stained bravado. "You're not what I expected either," she said finally. "Most humans I've met would have sold me out for a handful of credits." "Yeah, well, I'm a special snowflake," Jace replied, winking. Or a special idiot, depending on who you ask. Stick around, you'll figure out. Before Vira could respond, the ship lurched, a sharp jolt that sent Jace's toolkit crashing to the floor again. What the hell? He snapped, spinning back to the console. The radar blipped wildly, and a new alert scrolled across the screen. Proximity warning. Unidentified vessel detected. Oh, come on, he groaned. We just ditched those interceptor clowns. Who's crashing the party now? Vira leaned over, her shoulder brushing his as she studied the display. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through him. Her fur was softer than it had any right to be, and she smelled like that wild, earthy mix that was starting to mess with his head. It's not Zorith, she said, her voice tense. The signature is different. Human design. A transport, maybe. Human. Jace frowned, pulling up the rear camera feed. A blocky, utilitarian ship loomed behind them, its engines glowing a dull orange. Well, I'll be damned. That's the Stellar Mule, Lena Tark's rig. She's a buddy of mine, runs supply hauls out of Orion. Maybe she's here to save our asses. Or turn us in, Vira said, her ears flattening. Your station locked down because of me. How do you know she's not working with them? Lena? Nah, she's solid, Jace said, waving a hand. She owes me big. Fixed her ship after she flew it into an asteroid field on a dare. Woman's a maniac, but she's got my back. He tapped the comms, opening a channel. Hey, Lena, you stalking me or what? 'Cause I'm flattered, but I'm kind of busy running for my life here. The comms crackled, and a rough, familiar voice cut through. Jace, you dumbass. Lena Tar shot back, her tone a mix of exasperation and amusement. Whole station's buzzing about a fugitive and some idiot mechanic who bolted with her. Figured it was you. Nobody else is stupid enough to pull this crap. Love you too, Jace said, grinning. What's the play? You here to smuggle us out? Or we're just rubbernecking? Smuggle, Lena replied. Kronos 9's a decent hideout, but you've got heat on your tail. Dock with me. I got a cargo bay that'll fool the scanners. Move it, though. Orion security drones are sniffing around. See? Told you she's solid, Jay said to Vira, punching in the docking coordinates. Hang tight, Red. We're hitching a ride. The scout ship maneuvered toward the Stellar Mule, its cargo bay doors sliding open like a welcoming maw. Jace guided them in with a practiced hand, the ship slinking with a soft clang. The bay was a cavernous space stacked with crates, dimly lit by flickering overheads. As the hatch hissed open, Jace hopped out, stretching his arms with a groan. Home sweet home, for about 5 minutes anyway. Vira followed, her movements cautious, her tail swishing as she scanned the bay. Lena Tark strode toward them, a wiry woman with cropped black hair and a scarred cheek that spoke of too many bar fights. She carried a sidearm on her hip and a smirk on her face. Well, damn, Jace, she said, eyeing Vira. You didn't say your fugitive was a knockout. What's the story? Stealing hearts or stealing secrets? Bit of both, Jace quipped, leaning against a crate. Meet Vira Kael, scientist, rebel, and apparently my new full-time headache. Red, this is Lena. She's the only one crazy enough to bail us out. Vira inclined her head, her ears flicking warily. Thank you, she said. But we can't stay long. Zoritha's forces. Yeah, big bad general, I heard, Lena interrupted, waving a hand. Orion's locked tighter than a miser's wallet, but I've got a route to Kronos. 9 that'll dodge the drones. You two just keep your heads down, especially you, Fox Girl. You're hotter than a reactor core right now. Jace chuckled, but the sound died as a new alert pinged from the mule's console. Lena frowned, jogging over to check it. What now? She muttered, then cursed under her breath. Son of a, Orion's broadcasting a bounty. 50,000 credits for you, Jace, and double that for her. Dead or alive. 50,000, Jace said, feigning offense. I'm worth at least 60. Cheapskates. He glanced at Vira, who'd gone still, her tail stiffening. Guess your data's a bigger deal than you let on, Red. It's not just Orion, Lena said, her voice grim. Transmissions tagged with a Zorith signature, and a human one. Looks like your station boss, Dax Vin, cut a deal with Core. They know you're with me. Jace's grin vanished. Dax? That slimy bastard. I knew I should have sabotaged his ship last time he stiffed me on a job. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. So, we've got Zorth goons and a backstabbing pencil pusher after us. Perfect. Vira stepped closer, her shoulder brushing his again, this time lingering a heartbeat longer. Her warmth seeped through his jumpsuit, and he caught that damn sandalwood scent again, making his pulse kick up a notch. "We need to move," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Kronos 9's our only shot, but if they've tracked us this far—" "Yeah, I get it," Jace said, forcing his focus back to the problem. "Lena, how fast can this tub go?" "Fast enough," Lena replied, already heading for the cockpit. "Strap in. I'm punching it." Jace motioned Vira toward a pair of jump seats bolted to the bay wall. As they sat, the ship lurched, engines roaring to life. The crates rattled around them, and Vira's tail brushed his leg again. Accidentally, he figured, but it didn't stop his brain from noticing how soft it was. "So," he said, buckling in, "any chance this gets easier? 'Cause I'm running out of witty one-liners to keep us sane." Vira's golden eyes met his, a spark of something, gratitude, maybe flickering in them. "You're doing fine," she said, her voice softer now. "For a human who claims he's not a hero." "Don't get used to it," Jay shot back, but his smirk softened. "I'm just here for the free ride and the chance to stick it to Dax. Anything else is a bonus." The stellar mule surged forward, carrying them deeper into the void, and closer to a reckoning neither of them could yet see. The stellar mule tore through the void, its engines groaning under Lena Tark's aggressive piloting. Inside the cargo bay, Jace Harrow shifted in his jump seat, the straps digging into his shoulders as the ship banked hard to avoid a stray asteroid. Beside him, Vira Kael gripped the armrests, her crimson fur bristling with each jolt. The dim overhead lights cast shadows across her sharp features, highlighting the elegant curve of her jaw and the golden glint in her eyes. Jace caught himself staring again and quickly looked away, muttering, "Focus, man. She's a fugitive, not a date." "Everything all right over there?" Lena's voice crackled through the bay's intercom, laced with her usual mix of sarcasm and grit. "You two cozying up? Or do I need to turn down the heat?" Jace grinned, leaning toward the comm panel. "We're peachy, Lena. Just trying not to puke from your fancy flying. You sure you're not aiming for every rock out there?" "Keep whining, and I'll aim for you next," Lena shot back. "We're 20 minutes from Kronos 9. Sit tight. Those drones are still sniffing around, but I've got a trick or two on my sleeve." "Tricks, huh? Hope they're better than that time you tricked me into fixing your ship for free," Jace said, earning a muffled snort from the cockpit. He settled back, glancing at Vira. "She's a pain, but she's the best pain I know. We'll make it." Vira's ears flicked, her tail loosening slightly from its tense coil. "You trust her completely?" she asked, her voice low enough that the hum of the engines nearly swallowed it. "With my life," Jace replied, nodding. "Lena's hauled me out of worse jams than this, usually ones I started. She's not the type to sell out for credits, unlike certain station bosses I could name." He clenched his jaw, the sting of Dax Vin's betrayal still fresh. Dax, that rat. I should have known he'd trade us out the second he smelled a profit. Vira's claws tapped rhythmically against the armrest, a nervous tick that drew Jace's eye to her slender fingers. "Zorth has deep pockets," she said. "They've been buying influence across human stations for years. Your Dax isn't the first to take their coin, and he won't be the last." "Great," Jace muttered, rubbing his face. "So we're not just running from your psycho general. We've got a whole corrupt circus after us. Remind me why I didn't stay in bed this morning." "Because you're not the kind of man who walks away," Vira said, her golden eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his throat tighten. "I saw back on Orion. You could have handed me over, saved yourself the trouble. But you didn't." Jace shifted uncomfortably, her words hitting closer than he'd like. "Yeah, well, don't paint me as some noble knight," he said, forcing a grin. "I just didn't want Core trashing my bay. Plus, I've got a soft spot for underdogs, and tails apparently." He nodded toward her bushy appendage, then winced. "Not that I'm staring. Much." Her whiskers twitched, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're terrible at hiding it," she said, her voice softening. "But I don't mind. It's reassuring, in a way, knowing you're not as detached as you pretend." "Detached? Me?" Jace clutched his chest in mock offense. "Lady, I'm an emotional wreck. I just hide it under grease and bad jokes. Stick around. You'll see me cry over a busted engine one of these days." The ship shuddered again, cutting their banter short. A harsh beep erupted from the console on the wall, and Jace unbuckled, stumbling over to it as the bay tilted. "Lena, what's with the roller coaster?" he called, slapping the comms. "You hit something, or are we just practicing for the galactic stunt show?" "Shut up and look," Lena snapped back, her voice tight. "We got company, Zora Scout ship, 3 minutes out. They're hailing us, demanding we drop shields and prepare to be boarded." Jace's stomach sank as he pulled up the rear feed. A sleek, angular vessel loomed behind them, its hull glinting like a predator's teeth. "Well, damn," he muttered, glancing at Vira. "Your buddies don't mess around, do they?" "Guess they didn't by the we crashed in a freighter trick." Vira's ears flattened, her tail swishing with agitation. "Corps must have sent them to sweep the sector," she said. "They'll disable us if we don't comply, and they won't care who gets caught in the crossfire." "Disable us?" "Over my dead toolbox," Jace growled, scanning the bay for options. His eyes landed on a stack of cargo crates near the back, standard supply hauls, but one caught his attention. A reinforced container marked hazardous materials. "Lena, those crates, got anything explosive in there?" "Maybe," Lena replied, her tone wary. "Why?" "'Cause I got a dumb idea," Jace said, already moving toward the stack. "Vira, help me with this. We're going to give our tailgaters a little surprise." Vira hesitated, then followed, her movements swift despite the ship's swaying. Jace pried open the crate, revealing a cluster of volatile fuel cells, leftovers from some miner's botched job, no doubt. "Perfect," he said, grinning. "These babies will go up like a firework if we rig 'em right. Ever play hot potato with a bomb, Red?" "Not exactly," Vira said, her claws extending as she helped him lift one of the cells. Her arm brushed his, and the warmth of her fur sent a shiver up his spine. He fumbled the cell for a split second, cursing under his breath as her golden eyes flicked to him, sharp and knowing. "You're distracted," she murmured, her voice low enough to make his pulse jump. "Me? Nah," Jace lied, clearing his throat. "Just, calculating blast radius. Totally professional." He turned away fast, hauling the cell toward the bay's emergency hatch. Her scent, sandalwood and ozone, lingered in his nose, and he had to shake his head to refocus. "Get together, Harrow. Explosions first, Fox Lady later." "Lena, open the hatch on my mark," he shouted, wiring the cell to a makeshift timer with a spare detonator from his tool belt. "We'll jettison this, let it drift back, and boom, instant distraction." "Risky as hell," Lena said, but he could hear the grin in her voice. "I like it. Ready when you are." Vira dragged another cell over, her tail brushing his leg as she leaned in close to secure it. The contact was fleeting, but it lit his nerves like a live wire, and he caught himself holding his breath. "You're good at this," he said, forcing his tone light. "Sure you're not secretly a demolitions expert? 'Cause I could use a partner who doesn't flinch at a little kaboom." "I adapt," Vira replied, her voice husky from exertion, or something else he couldn't tell. Her eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, the chaos faded, leaving just the two of them in the dim bay, inches apart. Her fur gleamed, soft and wild, and he wondered what it'd feel like to run his hands through it. Then the ship jolted again, snapping him back. "Mark!" Jace yelled, slamming the hatch controls. The bay depressurized with a hiss, and the rig cells tumbled out, drifting toward the Zorth scout. He grabbed Vira's arm, pulling her behind a crate as the hatch sealed. "Down!" The explosion rocked the mule, a brilliant flash of orange lighting up the viewport. Jace peeked out, grinning as the scout veered off, its shield sparking from the blast. "Ah, take that, you overgrown hairballs," he crowed, pumping a fist. "Lena, punch it. Let's lose them while they're licking their wounds." "Already on it," Lena shot back, and the mules surged forward, engines roaring. The scout faded into the distance, but Jace knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. He slumped against the crate, catching his breath, and Vira sank down beside him. Her shoulder pressed against his, warm and solid, and he didn't pull away. "Nice work," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You're more than just a mechanic." "Yeah, well, don't tell anyone," Jace quipped, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've got a reputation to ruin." He turned to her, and damn if she wasn't closer than he'd realized, her fur brushing his arm, her golden eyes glinting in the half-light. His mouth went dry, and he scrambled for a joke to cover it. "Guess I owe you a thank you for not clawing me when I yanked you down. Those paws look lethal." "They can be," Vira said, a playful edge creeping into her tone. She flexed her claws, letting them catch the light, and Jace swallowed hard, his imagination running places it definitely shouldn't. "But I'll save them for Core. You're safe for now." "Good to know," he managed, his voice rougher than he intended. The air between them thickened, charged with something he couldn't name, and he had to fight the urge to close the gap. Her tail brushed his leg again, deliberately this time, he'd swear it, and his pulse kicked up like a misfiring engine. The comms crackled, shattering the moment. "We're clear," Lena said. "Kronos 9's dead ahead. Docking in 5. You two still alive back there?" "Barely," Jace called back, forcing a laugh. "Gonna need a stiff drink after that. Or 10. He stood, offering Vira a hand, and she took it, her grip warm and firm. Her fur slid against his palm, and he had to look away before his brain short-circuited completely. As they headed for the cockpit, the mule's sensors pinged again, a faint, erratic signal from Kronos 9. Jace frowned, checking the readout. "That's weird," he muttered. "Outpost should be quiet, minimal staff, like you said. Why is it lighting up like a distress beacon?" Vira's ears flattened, her tail stiffening. "It's not a distress signal," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's a trap. Zorth must have gotten here first, or someone tipped them off." Jace's grin faded, replaced by a cold knot in his gut. "Dax," he growled. "That double-crossing weasel. Lena, hold off docking. We've got a problem." "Too late," Lena replied, her tone grim. "They've locked us in with a tractor beam. We're going down, Jace. Brace yourselves." The mule shuddered as the beam yanked them toward Kronos 9, its skeletal docking arms looming in the viewport. Jace grabbed Vira's arm, pulling her close as the bay lights flickered red. "Guess we're crashing the party," he said, his voice tight. "Stick with me, Red. We're not done yet." Her golden eyes met his, fierce and unflinching, as she nodded. "Not even close," she said, her claws extending. The ship lurched, and the darkness of Kronos 9 swallowed them whole. The stellar mule groaned as the tractor beam dragged it inexorably toward Kronos 9, the supply outpost's skeletal docking arms clawing at the viewport like a trap snapping shut. Jace Harrow braced himself against the cargo bay wall, one arm slung around a support strut, the other gripping Vira Kael's wrist to keep her steady. The ship bucked and shuddered, red emergency lights painting the bay in a bloody glow. Vira's crimson fur bristled, her golden eyes wide but fierce, her bushy tail lashing against his leg with every jolt. "Well," Jace said, forcing a grin despite the sweat trickling down his spine. "If this is a trap, at least it's a fancy one. Hope they've got snacks." "Focus," Vira snapped, her voice sharp but tinged with something softer. Worry, maybe. Her claws flexed against his arm, a light scrape that sent an unexpected shiver through him. "If Zorth is here, we're not walking away easily." "Walking? Nah, I'm planning to limp away heroically," Jace quipped, though his stomach twisted as the mule's hull screeched against the docking clamps. "Lena, you still with us up there? Or are you too busy kissing the controls goodbye?" Lena Tark's voice crackled through the intercom, strained but steady. "Still here, jackass. Tractor beams got us pinned. Can't shake it. Brace for impact. We're hitting the pad hard." "Hard's my middle name." Jace shot back, then winced as Vira's tail smacked his shin. "Okay, fine, it's Daniel, but don't tell her that." He tightened his grip on Vira, pulling her closer as the ship lurched violently. Her warmth pressed against him, her fur soft and wild against his jumpsuit, and for a split second, he forgot the impending crash. Her scent, sandalwood and ozone, flooded his senses, and he had to shake his head to snap out of it. Not now, Harrow. Crashing first, drooling later. The mule slammed into Kronos 9's docking platform with a bone-rattling crunch, metal grinding against metal as the bay tilted wildly. Crates toppled, spilling their contents across the floor, and Jace's shoulder slammed into the strut, knocking the breath out of him. Vira stumbled into his chest, her claws digging into his arms for balance, and he caught her, steadying them both. "You okay, Red?" he rasped, his voice rough from the impact. "Fine," she said, her breath hot against his neck as she righted herself. Too hot, too close, his pulse kicked up, and he cursed his timing. Her golden eyes flicked to his, sharp and searching, and he swore she lingered a beat longer than necessary before pulling back. "We need to move." "Yeah, no kidding," Jace muttered, shaking off the daze and the heat pooling in his gut. He staggered to his feet, hauling her up with him as the bay's emergency lights flickered. The hatch to the cockpit hissed open, and Lena stumbled out, her scarred face smudged with soot, her sidearm already drawn. "Nice landing," Jace said, smirking. 10 out of 10 for style, 0 for comfort. "Bite me," Lena growled, brushing past him to check the bay's exit hatch. "We've got bigger problems." Sensors picked up Zorth signatures all over this rock before we went down. They were waiting. Waiting. Vira's ears flattened, her tail stiffening. "Dax must have sold us out faster than I thought. They knew we'd head here." Jace's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. "Dax, you slimy son of a... When I get my hands on him, I'm going to rewire his ship to play polka on loop." He grabbed a crowbar from a spilled toolkit, hefting it like a weapon. "All right, ladies, let's not keep our welcoming committee waiting. Lena, you got a plan? Or are we winging it?" "Winging it," Lena said, kicking the hatch open with a clang. "Stay low, move fast. There's a maintenance shaft 50 meters from the pad. Leads to the lower levels. We hit that, we might lose him." "Might is my favorite word," Jace said, motioning Vira ahead. "After you, Red. Ladies first. Unless there's shooting, then it's me first 'cause I'm gallant like that." Vira shot him a look, half exasperated, half amused, and darted out, her movements fluid despite the chaos. Jace followed, Lena covering their rear as they spilled on a Kronos 9's docking platform. The outpost was a grim sprawl of prefab structures and rusting machinery, its air thick with the tang of fuel and dust. The mule lay crumpled behind them, smoke curling from its hull, but there was no time to mourn. Shouts echoed from the shadows. Zorth soldiers, their black exosuits glinting as they closed in. "Move!" Lena barked, firing a burst from her sidearm. Pulse blasts scorched the air, one sizzling past Jace's ear close enough to singe his hair. "Damn it," he yelped, ducking behind crate. "I like that ear. Red, you see that shaft?" "There!" Vira pointed, her tail flicking as she sprinted toward a rusted grate set into the platform's edge. Jace bolted after her, crowbar swinging, and Lena brought up the rear, laying down cover fire. The soldiers returned shots, their aim tightening, and a blast caught Lena's leg, sending her stumbling. "Go!" she shouted, waving them off as she rolled behind a barrel. "I'll hold him." "Lena, you stubborn," Jace started, but Vira grabbed his arm, yanking him toward the grate. Her grip was firm, her claws grazing his skin, and the jolt of it shut him up. "Fine, but we're coming back for her," he growled, prying the grate open with the crowbar. It screeched in protest, revealing a narrow shaft dropping into darkness. "After you," Vira said, her voice tight but steady. Jace didn't argue. He slid in feet first, the metal cold and slick against his jumpsuit. He hit the bottom with a grunt, a good 10 feet down, and Vira followed, landing beside him with a grace he envied. The shaft was a tight fit, barely wide enough for two, and her body pressed against his as they crouched in the gloom. Her fur brushed his arm, warm and soft, and he could feel her breath on his neck, quick and shallow. "Close quarters," he muttered, his voice huskier than he meant. Hope you're not claustrophobic. I'll manage, Vira replied, her golden eyes glinting in the faint light filtering from above. Her tail curled around his leg, accidentally, maybe, and his heart slammed against his ribs. We need to keep moving, she said, but her voice wavered, and he caught a flicker of something in her gaze. Heat, tension, mirroring his own. Yeah, moving, Jace said, swallowing hard. Right after I remember how to breathe. He forced himself to focus, crawling forward through the shaft, her presence a maddening distraction at his back. The metal groaned around them, the sounds of pursuit echoing from above, boots stomping, orders barked in guttural Zorith tongues. They're pissed, he said, glancing over his shoulder. Guess blowing up their scout didn't win us any friends. They'll be more than pissed when I'm done, Vira said, her claws scraping the shaft as she kept pace. The data, I can still get it to the colonies. We just need a way off this rock. First things first, Jace said, spotting a junction ahead where the shaft split. Let's not die in a glorified sewer pipe. Left or right, Red? You're the brainiac here. Right, Vira decided, her tail brushing him again as she pointed. It slopes down, probably leads to the lower levels, like Linus said. Jace nodded, taking the turn, and they crawled on, the shaft narrowing until their shoulders bumped with every move. Her fur grazed his neck, her breath warm against his ear, and he gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to stop, and, no, idiot, not the time. The shaft dumped them into a wider maintenance corridor, lined with pipes and flickering conduits. Jace stood, helping Vira up, and her hand lingered in his a second too long, her claws retracting as she steadied herself. Thanks, she murmured, her voice low, and he swore he felt it in his bones. You're surprisingly steady under pressure. Surprisingly? Jace grinned, brushing off his jumpsuit. I'll take that as a compliment. Usually I'm a mess. Guess you bring out my inner hero. Or my inner lunatic. Jury's still out. Before she could reply, a clang echoed down the corridor, boots on metal, closing fast. Damn it, Jace muttered, hefting the crowbar. Guess our break's over. Stay behind me, Red. I'll swing first, you claw whatever's left. No, Vira said, stepping beside him, her claws fully extended. We fight together. Her tail swished, brushing his hip, and he caught a glimpse of her in the dim light. Fierce, beautiful, untamed. His mouth went dry, and he had to look away before his brain melted. The shadows shifted, and 3 Zorith soldiers rounded the corner, rifles raised. There, one snarled, firing a pulse blast that scorched the wall beside Jace's head. He ducked, swinging the crowbar hard, catching the lead soldier's knee with a sickening crunch. The guy went down howling, and Vira lunged, her claws slashing across another's chest, tearing through his suit like paper. The third fired again, grazing Jace's arm, and he cursed, tackling the soldier into the pipes with a clang. Nice teamwork, he panted, pinning the guy as Vira finished him with a swift strike. Remind me not to piss you off. Too late, she said, a faint smirk tugging at her lips as she wiped her claws on the soldier's suit. Her fur gleamed with sweat, clinging to her in a way that made Jace's pulse race, and he had to force his eyes up to her face. We need to keep going, she said, nodding toward the corridor's end. A sealed hatch marked lower storage. On it, Jace said, jogging over to pry it open. The hatch gave way, revealing a steep ladder dropping into a cavernous chamber stacked with crates and machinery, the outpost's underbelly. They descended fast, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. At the bottom, Jace spotted a control panel flickering with life. Jackpot, he said, cracking his knuckles. If I can hack this, maybe we can lock him out. Do it, Vira urged, her tail brushing his back as she stood guard. He worked fast, hot-wiring the panel with a trick from his merc days, but the system fought him, security overrides kicking in. Come on, you bastard, he muttered, then grinned as it beeped green. Got it, doors sealed. Buy us a few minutes. Vira turned to him, her golden eyes blazing with something raw, gratitude, adrenaline, maybe more. You're full of surprises, she said, stepping closer. Her fur brushed his chest, her breath warm on his face, and for a heartbeat, he forgot the danger. Her tail curled around his leg, deliberately now, and his hands twitched, itching to pull her in. Yeah, well, he rasped, his voice thick. Stick around. I got plenty more where that came from. The air crackled between them, heavy and electric, until a distant explosion shook the chamber, snapping them apart. They're breaching, Vira said, her ears swiveling. We're out of time. Then let's make it count, Jace said, grabbing her hand. They ran deeper into the storage bay, the promise of survival, and something else, driving them forward into the dark. The lower storage bay of Kronos. 9 sprawled before Jace Harrow and Vira Kael, like a labyrinth of shadows and steel, its towering crates and humming machinery casting jagged silhouettes in the flickering light. Jace's boots pounded the grated floor as he ran, Vira's hands still gripped in his, her claws grazing his skin with every stride. The sealed hatch behind them rattled under the Zorth soldiers' assault, the muffled thuds of breaching charges echoing through the chamber. Guess they didn't like my door trick, Jace panted, flashing Vira a grin. Should have rigged it to zap him, give him a real shock and welcome. Next time, Vira said, her voice tight but laced with a flicker of amusement. Her crimson fur gleamed with sweat, clinging to her lithe frame in a way that made Jace's pulse stutter, and her bushy tail swished behind her, brushing his leg as they darted around a stack of crates. He swallowed hard, forcing his eyes forward. Focus, idiot. Explosions now. I canny later. The bay was a maze, narrow alleys of cargo and machinery stretching in every direction, the air thick with the tang of oil and rust. Jace scanned for an exit, his crowbar still clutched in his free hand, its weight a comforting promise of violence, if it came to it. Any bright ideas, Red? He asked, ducking under a sagging conduit. 'Cause I'm fresh out of genius, and running in circles ain't my style. Vira's ears swiveled, catching distant shouts and the clatter of boots. There, she said, pointing to a flickering sign half buried behind a pile of scrap. Auxiliary dock access. If there's a ship left, we can use it to get off this outpost. But we'll need to move fast. Fast is my middle name, Jace quipped, then winced. Okay, it's still Daniel, but fast sounds cooler. He tugged her toward the sign, weaving through the debris. Her warmth pressed against him as they squeezed past a tight gap, her fur sliding along his arm, soft and electric. His breath hitched, and he muttered, Damn it, Red, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Making what harder? She asked, her golden eyes flicking to him, sharp and teasing. Her tail curled briefly around his waist. Deliberate this time, he'd swear it, and his brain short-circuited for a split second. Running, he lied, clearing his throat. Definitely just running. She smirked, a rare crack in her stoic mask, and he had to look away before he tripped over his own feet. Get a grip, Harrow. She's a fox, not a fantasy. The auxiliary dock loomed ahead, a rusted platform jutting from the chamber's far wall, cradling a battered shuttle that looked one gust away from falling apart. Jackpot, Jace said, jogging up to it. She's ugly, but I can work with ugly. Gimme 5 minutes, and I'll have her purring like a kitten, or at least coughing like a chain smoker. Make it 3, Vira urged, her ears flattening as a loud boom shook the bay. The sealed hatch buckled, smoke curling through the cracks. They're through. 3 it is, Jace said, popping the shuttle's access panel with the crowbar. He dove into the wiring, hands flying as he hot-wired the ignition, a trick from his merc days that never failed. Sparks flew, and he cursed under his breath. Come on, you stubborn piece of junk, don't make me beg. Vira stood guard, her claws extended, her tail lashing like a whip. The hatch exploded inward with a deafening roar, and Zorth's soldiers poured through, their black exosuits glinting under the bay's flickering lights. Jace, she shouted, ducking as a pulse blast scorched the crate beside her. Now, almost there, he yelled, slamming a fist into the panel. The shuttle's engines sputtered, then roared to life, a ragged growl that shook the platform. That's my girl. Hop in, Red, time to fly. He grabbed her arm, yanking her aboard as blasts peppered the deck around them. She stumbled into him, her body crashing against his chest, and for a heartbeat, he felt every curve beneath her fur, soft, warm, maddening. Sorry, he rasped, his voice rough, tight fit. Move, she snapped, but her golden eyes lingered on his, a spark of something hot flashing between them before she shoved past to the co-pilot's seat. Jace didn't argue. He slid in the pilot's chair, punching the throttle as the shuttle lurched forward. Soldiers fired wildly, one blast grazing the hull with a screech, but the ship broke free, rocketing toward the dock's exit hatch. "Hold on," Jace shouted, slamming a lever to override the hatch controls. The rusted doors groaned open, revealing the void beyond, and the shuttle shot out, the sudden shift in gravity pinning them to their seats. Kronos, 9 shrank behind them, a grim speck against the stars, but the radar blipped red. 2 Zorith interceptors peeling off on the outpost to give chase. "Damn it," Jace muttered, banking hard to dodge a pulse blast. "These guys are clingier than my ex. Any chance your data's got a make bad guys disappear button?" "Not yet," Vira said, her claws digging into the armrests. "But I can fly if you need a break. You're bleeding." "Bleeding?" Jace glanced at his arm, where the graze from earlier oozed red through his torn sleeve. Didn't notice. Guess I was too busy staring. Strategizing." He flashed her a grin, but the heat in his cheeks betrayed him. Her tail brushed his leg again, and he gripped the controls tighter, fighting the distraction. The interceptors closed in, their blasts lighting up the viewport. Jace wove through a patch of asteroid debris, the shuttle's hull rattling with every near miss. "We can't outrun him in this junker," he said, scanning the console. "But maybe we can outsmart him. Red, see that asteroid cluster dead ahead? Big one with a hole." "Yes," Vira said, leaning forward. Her shoulder pressed against his, her fur soft and warm, and he had to bite his tongue to stay focused. "You're not thinking." "Yup," Jace cut in, grinning. "We're threading the needle. Hang on, and maybe say a prayer to whatever fox gods you've got." He gunned the engines, aiming for the asteroid's jagged tunnel. A crazy, desperate shot, but it was all they had. The shuttle plunged in, the walls closing tight around them. Jace yanked the controls, dodging protrusions as the hull scraped and sparked. Vira's breath hitched beside him, her body tense, and her tail coiled around his calf, anchoring them together in the chaos. "You're insane," she whispered, her voice trembling but laced with awe. "Insane's my specialty," Jace replied, his grin wild as he wrestled the ship through. "Just don't tell my mom. She thinks I'm a respectable mechanic." The tunnel narrowed, the walls brushing the shuttle's sides, and a blast from behind rocked them, cracking the rear viewport. "Come on, baby, hold together," he muttered, coaxing the engines. They burst out the other side, the asteroid spitting them into open space. Jace hooped, pumping a fist, but the radar blipped, one interceptor still on their tail, the other caught in the tunnel's collapse. "One down," he crowed. "Now for the encore." A new alert cut him off, shrill and urgent. The console flashed. "Incoming transmission, Orion Station." Jace frowned, tapping it open, and Dax Vin's smug voice filled the cockpit. "Harrow, you idiot," Dax sneered. "Thought you could run? Zortha's got Kronos, 9 locked down, and I've got a front row seat to your funeral. Hand over the Vulpine, and maybe I'll let you crawl back to your grease pit." Jace's blood boiled, his grip tightening on the controls. "Dax, you backstabbing weasel," he snarled. "When I get out of this, I'm going to shove that bounty up your—" "Save it," Dax cut in. "General Core's here, and he's not in a talking mood. Enjoy the ride. Harrow, it's your last." The transmission clicked off, replaced by a deeper, colder voice. Core vaxed himself. "Vira Kael," Core growled, his guttural tone vibrating through the speakers. "You've caused enough trouble. Surrender the data, or I'll bury you and your human pet in that shuttle." Vira's ears flattened, her claws flexing. "Never," she spat, her voice steel. "You'll have to kill me first." "Gladly," Core replied, and the interceptor fired again, a blast clipping the shuttle's wing. The ship spun, alarms blaring, and Jace wrestled the controls, stabilizing them just shy of a drifting rock. "Okay, that's it," he said, his grin gone. "Red, strap in. I'm done playing nice." He flipped a switch, rerouting power to the thrusters, and spun the shuttle hard, facing the interceptor head-on. Let's see how he likes a game of chicken. Jace, no. Vira grabbed his arm, her claws digging in, her golden eyes wide. You'll get us killed. Maybe, he said, meeting her gaze, his voice low and fierce. But I'm not letting that bastard win. Trust me, Red, just this once. Her grip tightened, her fur brushing his skin, and he felt her tremble, not from fear, but something deeper. She nodded, her tail curling tighter around his leg, and he hit the throttle. The shuttle surged forward, barreling toward the interceptor. Core's ship fired, blast streaking past, but Jace held course, his jaw set. At the last second, the interceptor veered, scraping the shuttle's hull with a screech as it pulled away. Jace yanked up, sending them spiraling clear, and the interceptor slammed into a drifting asteroid, erupting in a fireball. Hell yeah! Jace shouted, slumping back as the alarms quieted. That's what I call a win. Red, you okay? Vira exhaled shakily, her hand still on his arm, her claws retracting. You're insane, she said again, but her voice was softer now, her golden eyes locked on his. And I'm starting to like it. Good. Jace rasped, his throat dry as she leaned closer, her fur brushing his chest. The cockpit felt too small, too hot, and her tail slid higher up his leg, sending his pulse into overdrive. 'Cause I'm not done surprising you. Her breath grazed his jaw, her lips inches away, and he froze, caught between wanting to close the gap and knowing they couldn't. Not yet. The comms crackled, shattering the moment. Jace, Vira, status. Lena's voice, rough but alive, cut through. I'm pinned on Kronos 9, but I've got eyes on Core. He's coming for you. Lena, you tough bastard, Jace said, relief flooding him. Hang tight, we'll get you. Red's got a plan, right? Vira nodded, pulling back, her tail slipping away with a reluctance he felt in his bones. We need a relay station, she said, her voice steadying. Somewhere to transmit the data before Core catches us. Then we're not out of the woods yet, Jace said, turning back to the controls. The shuttle limped forward, battered but alive, carrying them deeper into the void, and toward a fight they couldn't avoid. The battered shuttle limped through the void, its engines coughing like a dying beast, as Jace Harrow nursed it toward the coordinates Vira Kael had pulled from the NAV chart. The relay station, a squat, automated outpost orbiting a nameless gas giant, was their last shot at getting her data to the Voran colonies. Through the cracked viewport, the station loomed ahead, its skeletal antennas glinting faintly against the planet's swirling violet clouds. Jace's hands tightened on the controls, his arms still stinging from the graze he'd taken on Kronos 9. Well, he said, flashing Vira a grin, she ain't pretty, but she's our ticket to screwing over Core. Ready to play hero, Red? Vira's golden eyes flicked to him, sharp and steady despite the exhaustion lining her face. Her crimson fur was matted with sweat and dust, clinging to her in a way that made Jace's throat tighten, and her bushy tail curled loosely around her seat, brushing his leg with every shift. I've been ready, she said, her voice low and fierce. But we're not safe yet. Core's out there. He'll find us. Yeah, he's got a real knack for crashing parties, Jace quipped, banking the shuttle toward the station's docking ring. Guess we'll just have to crash his face first. Lena's still kicking back on Kronos 9, she'll buy us time. He tapped the comms, opening a channel. Lena, you alive, you crazy bastard? The line crackled, and Lena Tark's rough voice cut through. Barely, you grease monkey. Core's tearing Kronos apart looking for you. I've got him pinned in the upper levels for now. Get that data out, then come get me. I'm not dying on this rock for your sorry ass. Love you too, Jace said, smirking. Hold tight, we'll swing by with bells on. He cut the comms, guiding the shuttle into the docking clamp with a jolt that rattled his teeth. All right, Red, let's move. This heap's on borrowed time, and so are we. The hatch hissed open, spilling them into the relay station's sterile interior. A maze of humming consoles and blinking lights, all automated. No crew to complicate things. Jace hefted his crowbar, scanning the shadows, while Vira darted to the main terminal, her claws clicking against the controls. 8 minutes, she said, pulling a data chip from a hidden pocket in her tunic. That's how long it'll take to encrypt and transmit to every Vulpine colony. Can you keep us alive that long? 8 minutes, Jace whistled, leaning against the console. I've kept worse junkers running longer than that with spit and hope. We're golden, unless Core shows up with his fan club. He glanced at her, catching the way her fur gleamed under the station's cold light, the subtle sway of her tail as she worked. His pulse kicked up, and he muttered, "Damn it, Red, you're making this hero gig real distracting." "Focus," Vira said, but her whiskers twitched, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. She leaned over the terminal, her tunic pulling tight across her back, and Jace had to look away before his brain melted. Her tail brushed his leg again, deliberate. He'd bet credits on it, and he gripped the crowbar tighter, fighting the heat pooling in his gut. The station's sensors blipped, a sharp warning cutting through the tension. Jace spun to the viewport, his grin fading. "Speak of the devil," he muttered. A Zorith gunship loomed into view, its sleek hull bristling with weapons. General Korvax's personal rig, no doubt. "Guess he didn't like our asteroid trick." "Red, how's that upload?" 3 minutes in, Vira said, her voice tight as she typed faster. "It's locked. I can't stop it now. We just need to hold him off." "Hold him off with what?" "Harsh language and a crowbar," Jace said, jogging to his secondary console. He hacked into the station's defenses, basic turrets, nothing fancy, and activated them, their barrels swiveling to track the gunship. Here's hoping these pea shooters annoy him enough to keep his distance. The gunship fired first, a volley of pulse blasts slamming into the station's shields. The floor bucked, throwing Jace into Vira, and he caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist as they stumbled against the terminal. Her fur pressed against him, warm and soft, her breath hot on his neck, and for a split second, he forgot the chaos. "Sorry," he rasped, his voice rougher than he meant. "Bad timing." "Always," Vira murmured, her golden eyes locking onto his, her claws grazing his chest as she steadied herself. Her tail curled around his thigh, tight and possessive, and his heart slammed against his ribs. 6 minutes left, she added, pulling back, but the heat in her gaze lingered, searing him. "Right, 6, Jace said, swallowing hard as he released her. "Let's not die before I figure out what that look means." He turned back to the console, rerouting power to the shields as the gunship pounded them again. The turrets fired back, feeble sparks against Core's armor, but bought time. A new alert screeched, boarding pods detected. Jace cursed, spinning to the viewport. 3 pods launched from the gunship, streaking toward the station's hull. "Incoming," he shouted, grabbing Vira's arm. "They're crashing the party, literally. We need a choke point." "There!" Vira pointed to a narrow corridor branching off the main chamber, its bulkhead doors still functional. "We can bottleneck them by the last few minutes." "Love a good bottleneck," Jace said, hauling her toward it. He slammed the controls, sealing the bulkhead behind them as the pods breached, their impacts shaking the station. The corridor was tight, barely wide enough for 2, and Vira's body pressed against his as they braced for the fight. Her fur brushed his arm, her breath warm on his cheek, and he gritted his teeth, the proximity driving him half-mad. "You're killing me, Red," he muttered, his voice low. "Not the time to notice how good you feel." "Survive this," she whispered, her golden eyes blazing, "and I'll give you a better time to notice." Her tail slid up his leg, slow and deliberate, and he nearly dropped the crowbar, his blood roaring in his ears. "Deal," he rasped, just as the bulkhead shuddered. Zorith soldiers breached it with a blast, pouring in, and Jay swung, cracking the first one's helmet with a crunch. Vira lunged beside him, her claws slashing through armor, a blur of crimson fury. They fought back to back, her tail brushing his hips with every move, her snarls mixing with his grunts. 5 minutes, she shouted, dodging a blast that scorched the wall. "5's plenty," Jace yelled, smashing another soldier's rifle aside. "I've lasted longer in worse bar fights." The corridor filled with bodies, 3 down, then 5, but more came, relentless. A blast grazed Vira's shoulder, and she hissed, stumbling into him. He caught her, his arm around her waist, her fur slick with sweat against his hand. "You good?" he panted, his voice raw. "Fine," she growled, pushing off him to claw another soldier. For minutes, the station rocked again, a deeper tremor, Core's gunship hammering the shields. Jace glanced at the terminal through the corridor's open end, its upload bar ticking agonizingly slow. "Come on, you digital snail," he muttered, then froze as a new shadow loomed. Core vaxed himself, stepping through the breached bulkhead, his black fur bristling, his scarred muzzle twisted in a snarl. "Vira," Core rumbled, his voice a thunderclap. "Your little rebellion ends here." He raised a massive pulse rifle, aiming square at her chest. "Over my dead crowbar," Jace snarled, shoving Vira behind him. He swung, but Core batted the weapon aside with a claw, sending it clattering down the corridor. The general grabbed Jace by the throat, lifting him off the ground, and slammed him into the wall, stars exploding in his vision. "Jace!" Vira cried, lunging at Core, her claws raking his arm. He roared, dropping Jace to swat at her, and Jace hit the floor, gasping, his hands scrabbling for the crowbar. He found it, rolled, and swung low, cracking Core's knee. The general staggered, and Vira pounced, driving her claws into his shoulder, forcing him back. 3 minutes, she shouted, grappling with Core as Jace staggered up. The general threw her off, slamming her into a crate, and Jace tackled him, adrenaline overriding the pain. They crashed to the floor, Jace pinning Core's rifle arm as Vira recovered, her tail lashing. "Stay down, you ugly bastard," Jace grunted, wrestling Core's claw away from his throat. Vira darted to the terminal, checking the upload. 2 minutes. "Red, tell me it's almost done." "Almost," she yelled, dodging as Core kicked Jace off, rising with a roar. The general charged her, but Jace grabbed his leg, tripping him, and Vira leaped over the terminal, claws slashing his face. Blood sprayed, black and thick, and Core howled, clutching his muzzle. 1 minute, Vira called, her voice fierce. The station shook again, shields failing, and the gunship fired a final volley, cracking the viewport. Jace tackled Core once more, pinning him as the upload bar hit 100%. A chime rang out, transmission complete. "It's done," Vira shouted, her golden eyes blazing with triumph. "The colonies have it." "Then let's end this," Jace said, slamming Core's head into the floor. The general slumped, out cold, and Jace staggered back, panting. "That's for Lena, you son of a—" The station lurched, alarms blaring, structural failure imminent. Vira grabbed his arm, her claws digging in, her fur pressed against him as they ran for the shuttle. "We need to go now," she urged, her tail curling around his waist, pulling him close. They stumbled aboard, Jace slamming the controls as the station crumbled behind them. The shuttle broke free, rocketing into the void as Kronos 9's relay exploded in a fireball, taking Core's gunship with it. Jace slumped in the pilot's seat, his chest heaving, and Vira sank beside him, her shoulder brushing his, her breath ragged. "We did it," she whispered, her golden eyes locked on his, her fur gleaming in the cockpit's dim light. "The colonies are free." "Yeah," Jace rasped, turning to her. "And I'm still alive to enjoy it, barely." She leaned closer, her tail sliding up his leg, her warmth flooding him, and he froze as her lips hovered inches from his. "Red, you're going to kill me faster than Core ever could." "Survive this," she murmured, echoing her earlier promise, and closed the gap, her lips brushing his in a kiss that was soft, fierce, electric. Her fur pressed against him, her claws grazing his neck, and he groaned into it, his hands tangling in her crimson locks, lost in her heat. The comms crackled, Lena's voice, faint but alive. "Jace, Vira, don't tell me you're making out while I'm stuck here." Jace pulled back, grinning, his voice rough. "Wouldn't dream of it, Lena. We're coming for you, right after I catch my breath." Vira smirked, her tail still curled around him, and he knew this was just the beginning. The shuttle's engines sputtered as Jace Harrow guided it back toward Kronos. 9. The wreckage of the relay station fading into a glowing smear against the gas giant's violet swirl. Vira Kael sat beside him, her crimson fur still disheveled from their fight with Core Vax, her golden eyes fixed on the viewport. Her bushy tail rested across his lap, a warm, possessive weight that kept his pulse simmering even as the adrenaline ebbed. That kiss, soft, fierce, electric, lingered on his lips, and he had to fight the urge to pull her back into it. "Well," he said, forcing a grin to cover the heat in his chest, "we saved the galaxy, kicked Core's ass, and I'm still breathing. Not a bad day's work, huh, Red?" Vira's whiskers twitched, a faint smirk curling her lips. "Not bad," she agreed, her voice low and husky, sending a shiver down his spine. "But we're not done yet. Lena's waiting." "Yeah, she'll never let me live it down if we leave her hanging," Jace said, adjusting the controls. "Probably already planning to guilt-trip me into fixing her ship again. Woman's a menace." He glanced at Vira, catching the way her fur caught the cockpit's dim light, the subtle curve of her shoulder beneath it. "You, holding up okay? That was one hell of a scrap back there." "I'm fine," she said, her tail tightening briefly around his leg, a deliberate tease that made his breath hitch. "Better than fine, thanks to you." Her golden eyes met his, sharp and warm, and he swore he saw a promise in them, something more than gratitude. "Don't get all mushy on me now," Jace quipped, though his voice came out rougher than he meant. "I've got a reputation to ruin. Can't have you thinking I'm some soft-hearted hero." He turned back to the viewport, but her closeness, her scent, sandalwood and ozone, kept tugging at him, a distraction he didn't mind one bit. Kronos. 9 loomed ahead, its docking platform a smoking ruin from their earlier crash. The shuttle's sensors pinged, picking up faint life signs amid the debris. Lena, stubborn as ever. "There she is," Jace said, easing the ship down. "Let's grab her and get the hell out of here before Core's buddies send a cleanup crew." The shuttle touched down with a groan, its hull creaking as the hatch hissed open. Jace hopped out, crowbar in hand, just in case, while Vira followed, her claws extended, her tail swishing with alertness. The platform was a graveyard of twisted metal and smoldering crates, the air thick with dust and the tang of burnt circuits. "Lena," Jace called, his voice echoing. "You better not be napping on the job." A muffled curse answered him, and Lena Tark limped out from behind a toppled crate, her scarred face smeared with grime, her left leg bandaged with a strip of her own jacket. She leaned on a scavenged rifle like a crutch, glaring at him. "Took you long enough, you lazy bastard," she growled, then nodded at Vira. "Fox girl, you still in one piece." "Barely," Vira said, her tone dry, but her ears flicking with relief. "You?" "Same," Lena replied, hobbling over. "Core's goons pulled back after you blew the relay. Guess they figured the party was over. Left me with a few parting gifts, though." She tapped her leg, wincing. "Looks like you had fun without us," Jace said, slinging an arm around her to help her toward the shuttle. "Come on, Gimpy, let's get you patched up before you bleed all over my upholstery." "Your upholstery's already trash," Lena shot back, but she leaned on him, grunting with each step. Vira took her other side, her fur brushing Jace's arm as they moved, and he caught her sidelong glance, a flicker of something soft that made his chest tighten. "Damn it, Red, you're going to be the death of me." They hauled Lena aboard, settling her in the back with a medkit scavenged from the bay. Jace slid into the pilot's seat, punching the throttle as Vira strapped him beside him. "Next stop, anywhere but here," he said, guiding the shuttle up and away from Kronos 9's wreckage. "Any requests, ladies?" "I'm thinking a beach planet. Sand, sun, and no one shooting at us." "Dream on," Lena muttered from the back, rummaging through the kit. "Just get us to a friendly port. Interstellar Watch owes me a favor. They'll want a piece of this mess." Interstellar Watch. Vira's ears perked, her tail uncurling slightly. "They're neutral. Could they protect the colonies now that the data's out?" "Maybe," Lena said, wrapping her leg with a bandage. "They've got ships, muscle, and a hate-on for Zortha's council. If your cure's as big as you say, they'll jump at the chance to stick it to Core's bosses. Sounds like a plan, Jace said, plotting a course for an IW outpost he'd heard of, Vega Relay, a few hours out. Let's hope they've got better coffee than Orion. That swill was a crime against taste buds. The shuttle hummed along, the stars streaking past, and a rare quiet settled over them. Jace leaned back, his arm brushing Vira's, her warmth a steady anchor in the chaos they'd left behind. So, he said, breaking the silence, you did it, Red. Save your people, took down the bad guy. What's next? Retire to a foxed inn with a medal. Vira's whiskers twitched, her golden eyes softening as she looked at him. Not yet, she said. The colonies need leadership, someone to make sure the cure gets where it's needed. I can't stop now. Figures, Jace said, nodding. You're too stubborn to quit. Guess I'll have to stick around. Someone's got to keep you out of trouble. And fix your ships. I'm betting those colonies don't have a decent mechanic. You're offering? Vira asked, her voice teasing, her tail sliding higher up his leg, a slow, deliberate caress that made his breath catch. I thought you were done with heroics. Me? Nah, Jace said, his grin widening. I'm just getting started, especially if it means sticking close to you. Gotta keep an eye on that tail. It's got a mind of its own. He winked, and she smirked, her claws tapping the armrest in a rhythm that matched his racing pulse. Lena groaned from the back, cutting through the moment. Get a room, you two, she said, her tone dripping with mock disgust. I'm trying to bleed in peace back here. Jealousy's a bad look, Lena, Jace shot back, laughing. Don't worry, I'll save some charm for you. But his eyes stayed on Vira, her smirk deepening, and he knew he was in deep, way deeper than he'd planned. The shuttle docked at Vega Relay hours later, its IW crew swarming them with medics and questions. Lena got patched up proper, her legs stitched, and her grumbling dialed back to a dull roar. Jace and Vira handed over the story, Core's defeat, the data spread, and the IW brass jumped on it, dispatching ships to secure the Vulpine colonies before Zorth could retaliate. Core himself was a ghost, either dead in the relay's collapse or limping back to lick his wounds, but Jace figured they'd cross that bridge when it came. For now, they stood on Vega's observation deck, the gas giant's violet glow painting the void beyond the massive windows. Jace leaned against the railing, Vira beside him, her fur brushing his arm in a way that felt natural now, inevitable. So, he said, glancing at her, we're officially galaxy savers. What's that feel like, Red? Exhausting, she admitted, her voice soft, her tail curling around his leg again. Less teasing now, more grounding. But worth it. You. Same, Jace said, turning to face her. Though I'm mostly just glad I didn't die before getting that kiss. Worth every pulse blast. He grinned, but his voice softened, a rare crack in his bravado. You're something else, Vira Kael. I'm not used to sticking my neck out for anyone. But you? I'd do it again. Her golden eyes held his, warm and fierce, and she stepped closer, her fur pressing against his chest, her claws grazing his arm. Good, she murmured, her breath warm on his jaw. Because I'm not letting you go that easily. She leaned in, her lips brushing his again, slower this time, deeper, a promise wrapped in heat. Her tail tightened around him, her warmth flooding him, and he kissed her back, his hands sliding to her waist, lost in the wild, untamed feel of her. The deck's hum faded, the galaxy shrinking to just them, grease-stained mechanic and fox-like rebel, tangled in something neither had expected. When they pulled apart, breathless, Jace grinned, his voice rough. You keep that up, Red, and I'll follow you to the end of the damn universe. Careful what you promise, she teased, her smirk returning, her claws tracing a light line down his chest that made his knees weak. I might hold you to it. Count on it, he said, pulling her close again, her fur soft under his hands. The stars stretched out before them, endless and bright, and for once, Jace didn't care where they went next, as long as she was there. Days later, the Vulpine colonies erupted in chaos and hope. Riots against Zortha's council, celebrations as the cure spread. Interstellar Watch stepped in, brokering peace and jailing what was left of Kor's loyalists. Jace took a gig as a technical advisor for the colonies, fixing ships and cracking jokes, while Vira emerged as a leader, her voice rallying her people. Lena, true to form, demanded a new ship as payment for her troubles, and Jace obliged, grumbling all the way. But the nights were theirs, Jace and Vira, stealing moments between the madness. One evening, on a colony ship's observation deck, she found him staring at the stars, his jumpsuit swapped for something cleaner, though still stained with grease. Lost in thought, she asked, her tail brushing his leg as she leaned beside him. "Nah," he said, grinning. "Just wondering how I went from fixing engines to kissing a Fox Lady rebel. Life's weird." "Very," she agreed, her golden eyes glinting with mischief. She stepped closer, her fur pressing against him, her claws grazing his neck as she pulled him into another kiss. Slow, searing, a claim he'd never tire of. "But I like weird." "Me too," Jace murmured against her lips, his hands tangling in her crimson fur. "Here's to more of it." The galaxy spun on, vast and wild, but for them, it was enough, just the two of them, a mechanic and a rebel, carving out a future among the stars.